Being memorable isn't about being polished and perfect. It's taking a risk, but risk taking is sexy.
What do you see as the roots of a lack of charisma and self-expression?
Patterns are all around us. You probably take the same route to work. You probably eat at the same place. You probably buy the same branded food. So all of that, it's got a value, it's efficient, but it makes you boring.
How does a man start to develop personal charisma?
The secret is, I think we have a bunch of lifetimes within a lifetime. I think we get chances to reset. All fear exists in the future, and all sadness exists in the past. We don't have to belong to our story, because the story you're writing now is much more fun.
So, listeners, you're in for a treat today, because this is like going back in time a bit for me. Today's guest is a man who I have known for the best part of, I think, we would calculate just before, I think it's about 16 or 17 years ago we first met. So we first met in the dating scene and were coaching men way back then when, the world was a very different place, actually, a very different place to it is now. And we were supporting men in having better dating lives and so forth back then. But he's really expanded his repertoire of work. And it goes completely in line with who I know him to be as well, to be honest. Today we have a man who is steeped in an understanding of social and relational dynamics that goes way beyond most of the people that you're following. This is someone who has literally lived and breathed this work for 2 decades. Today I have with me Marcus. Marcus, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks. And I'm excited to be here. It's been a while since we last spoke, so I'm looking forward to pouring out as much gooey knowledge out of my brain as I can to everyone listening.
Yeah. We used to work for a now defunct company in London. We used to take men to bars and clubs and out on the street to meet women. And I have to say, we touched on it before we started recording, is like much of the things that we did back then or would say to people to do, not that they were malicious or cruel or evil in any sort of way. They were generally incredibly fun and funny, but you just literally couldn't do those things today because the world's changed, right? The world's changing what and deemed was kind of acceptable and unacceptable in the ways to be, which, we'll probably touch on a little bit throughout the episode. But I guess the question for you is more for me interested is like, what have you been up to in these last kind of 16 years?
Yeah. Well, I started this journey of trying to improve my social skills. Yeah, 2 decades ago, like you say, because I was in that situation where I was at university and I remember being on the dance floor and no one would dance with me. And then I couldn't get dates. It was just incredibly frustrating, especially at that time of your life when, that's supposed to be the time when everything happens and doors open. So I decided I wanted to learn how to build those social skills. And so the last 2 decades, for the first decade, I was running workshops, as you say, taking people out, teaching them how to build their social skills in real world environments. And I worked with lots of fine trainers like yourself, but also I was instructing trainers. So lots of companies sprung up in that dating industry. So I was teaching their instructors and whatnot. And then the second decade, I went a bit more spiritual. I think a lot of coaches end up getting a bit into the old deep and meaningful. So I went into a more holistic approach to, why are we meeting people anyway? What's the need for that? And then, so I spent 5 years going through Ace Ventura, living in a monastery. Well, not living in a monastery, but having that attitude of, just being at peace with everything. Anyway, luckily I got through all that. And so 5 years ago, I started to put stuff out there again and started to just rebuild that idea of how do you meet people in today's world? Because I think we live in a digital world and, social connections are, I like to say they're stronger than ever. They're not, they're weaker than ever. So I had the really good idea of launching a social skills company again, back in the middle of COVID, which brings us up to modern times. That's the macro overview. But in those 2 decades, I've been teaching, and a big philosophy or a big thing I try and approach is, what would happen if I did X, Y, Z, or what would the result be if I said this thing to this person? Because I always wondered, when I was at school, I wonder if I could say a certain string of words and a certain order of sentences that would make that person respond in a certain way. It was just like one of those fantasy feelings, thoughts I had at the back of my head. So I guess for the last 2 decades, I've been testing that out, building that skill of calibration of like, would that work? And if it didn't work, why didn't it work? So taking a very scientific approach to the social arts, as it were.
Mm. You're really honing your kind of attunement, social attunement, emotional attunement to people and out social situations and difference, and like a real in the field scientist.
Yeah, very much so. One thing I learned very early on is I would so I traveled all around the world teaching, and secretly I was teaching, but I was also learning to develop the skills even more myself. I think that's part of the process. And I had a student in I think we probably both met him at some point. It was this artist, and he was running down the street trying to stop girls and chat them up with varied success. And I remember later that summer, I flew to Sydney, Australia, and I was with a mutual friend of ours, Russ, and we saw the same guy in the street in Sydney running up, and which was like what? But what was interesting is he was saying the same thing. He was using the
Mm.
same line, and I said, "Oh, so what you've been up to?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I've been trying to shut girls in the street because I've done like 1,000 approaches." And I was like, "Okay, how's that going?" And he's like, "Yeah." He was a bit elusive with that. And what I realized is, going back to my original point, what I realized is some people will do like, say, they will, they build up the courage to talk to somebody and they make a massive leap from doing that. What other people do it 1,000 times, like a masochist, and then they won't progress. So why is it some people could just get a few experiences under their belt and do really well, and others would just keep like doing, like hitting it and hitting it and hitting it and not progress at like a in a really like sort of substantial way? And so the big secret I discovered, let's get to the good stuff early. But the big secret I discovered is after after you put yourself on the line like that and, you strike up a conversation with a stranger, whether it's a guy, a girl, could be anything, could be talking to a group of people at a party, whatever it is. The person who doesn't do very well, what they do is they get the result, whether it was good or bad, and they go, right, on to the next. But the person who does really well, what they do is they take the action, and then afterwards they ask themselves, what did I do well? So they focus on their win, because the fact that you walked up is always a win. The second question is, how do you know you did well? And what that does is that causes you to look for the actual evidence that you did well. Because you could just say, yeah, I did well. But if you ask, how do you know, then you'll replay the best parts. And the third question you ask is, if I could do that again, what would I do differently to improve the result, right, in a way that I wanted? And so how I stumbled on this is I was heading down an escalator one day in London, and there was a girl coming up the other way, and I was like, oh, this would be the perfect place to say something. And then of course she just passed. I was like, oh. And we all have those kind of experiences. We're just like, oh well, whatever. But what I did differently that day is I got on the tube, the subway, and I was riding home, and I was like, I went through those three questions, and that third question, like, so first of all, what did I do well? I noticed her, right? I could have just had my head down looking at my feet. How do I know I did well? Because she had like a green top on, she had a blue scarf, like just, so I know I noticed her, right? So just a very small win, but the question, like, if I could do that again, what would I do better next time? I didn't have an answer straight away. I just, like, in my mind, there was just a guy with a broom sweeping the floor. Like, I don't know, right? But luckily, because I was on such a long train journey, I thought, well, I'm going to use this entire train journey to come up with what I could have done better. Just first 30 minutes, like vacant, the void, nothing, no, anything. Just, I'm like literally dribbling. But after that, because I stuck with it for so long, I think I came up with, well, what's she doing? She's going up the stairs, and what am I doing? I'm going down the stairs. And so out of nowhere, I was like, wait, you're going up the escalator, I'm going down the escalator. How romantic! We'll tell our kids about this one day. And I was like, that was the line. That's what I should have said. So I knew that was the line because it made me laugh. It made me feel emotion. And emotion's the secret of connection. So as fate would have it, when I came out the next tube station, I can't remember where it was, but I was going up an escalator. Guess who was someone else was coming to, I was like, I'm going to try this out. And I was like, whoa, you're going down the escalator. I'm going up the escalator. How romantic. We'll tell our kids about. And she burst out laughing. Right? I just left it there, but I was like, whoa, what happened? You know, like the Spider-Man moment where he knows the Spider-Man. So the fact is, I'd already won because I knew it's going to make me laugh to say it. I wasn't trying to get a reaction. I was actually just trying to express myself. And so from that point, that was like where things really changed for me because I started to get logical after I'd taken action. Whereas before I'd try to think of the right thing to say and the right thing to do before I took action. And by action, I mean going up and chatting to somebody. And that's the big mistake I think all of us guys make. We try and, what's the perfect icebreaker? What's the perfect opening line? Well, actually, you ask that after you've done it because then you'll remember it. So.
Mm. Wow, that's really, and I love that. And we're gonna go along this a bit. I'm gonna go back to something, but I love that. Ultimately, you know, what you really point out there is like there's a number of things, right? That there's a nature to thinking about things with an openness. There's like a spaciousness, like you said. You sat on that train ride, and you're like, okay, what could I have done better? And instead of kind of going into nothing, like telling yourself, there's nothing I could have done better. There's nothing I could have done, or or even saying there was no win. You were like, there's a win here. I noticed that there was an opportunity. Whereas a lot of men will actually just go into kind of a self-defeatedness and be like, oh my God, I missed the opportunity. What's wrong with me? I'm such a fucking loser. Like, I'm never going to meet anyone. You know, it's the meaning we create out of these little moments that actually destroys our confidence and so forth. But you sat on that train ride with an openness, you know, almost like a meditation where you're just like waiting for inspiration. You're waiting for a deeper, meaningful piece of insight and wisdom to arrive. And you allowed for it, which is like, you know, it's not just, this is something we take across all areas of our lives, you know, where it's like, oh, actually, how did I do? How did I just do at that thing? How could I be better? And what I really love actually about the story as well is that you almost trained yourself that when the opportunity came up again, you noticed the opportunity faster and you were able to get into action quicker in that moment. And then there's the piece about what you said, you know, telling the story. They love that. This is a beautiful moment we can tell our kids about this. But that it was just out of pure fun. There was no like attachment to getting something from this woman in that moment, right? There was nothing, you didn't want to get something from her, which I think was one of the things that, you know, as in the dating scene, or especially in the scene of kind of pickup that we used to exist in many, many years ago, there was this attachment to always getting something at the end. It's always about me and me getting my thing. And I think this is something I always appreciated about you from years ago, was just the general desire to just have fun and have people be in your experience of fun without need or without desire to like get them into bed or get their phone number, but just to be a source of joy in the world and have that running through your system and your energy, and for the people that come into contact to experience that. And I think that's just a really beautiful way to look at not just like dating and interacting with women and social interactions. This is a way we can kind of bring into just like life being a source of joy, a source of goodness. And I love that. It's all really beautiful. But now we're going to get to the stuff where everyone's struggling with.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
So I guess the question is like, I know that you work with men, you work in workshops, you also work in companies and with executives and with teams and stuff like that. What are the sort of men that you work with in terms of like, you know, what sort of jobs do they have? What sort of backgrounds do they come from? And then by extension of that, like, what sort of issues are they facing?
Well, the issues they're facing are very similar, whatever their background. That's the first thing. Ultimately, the issue is lack of confidence. But really, what's the deeper issue going on there? It's not knowing who they are. It's who they think they are and who they've been told they are, but really who they truly are at their core. Because, you know, like there's a thing with coaches where we just drop sound bites, right? But one of them is, it's not about impression, it's about expression. But if you don't know who you are and you're not connected to that, it's very hard to express that. So that's like from a macro perspective, they've all got that kind of struggle. Like, how do I express truly who I am and who am I? And that almost feeds into that, the corny advice of just be yourself. But it is true, just be yourself, but it's be yourself fearlessly. So that's where I'd say they struggle. From a more professional environment, though, generally people from engineering backgrounds, IT backgrounds, uh, work with people from financial industry, anywhere where there's a lot of the logical side of the mind is being used. So the logical side of the mind, problem solving, like how do I fix this thing? But connection, as I mentioned earlier, is emotionally driven. So as guys, we have emotions. Unless we're a stone cold sociopath, but we have emotions. But it's how do we express that authentically? Because when we open up like that, then we can place ourselves in the firing line for judgment of like, if I share this, here's my still beating heart, like, but then you do that and you get rejected. It's like, ugh, ugh. So that can be a fear that keeps people stuck. So yeah, in answer to your question, people from all walks, but generally those areas, and engineers as well. They seem to be the main group. Not worked with many actors. I think they seem to have it down pat. So, but
it's funny because I worked in, as the listeners know, and then Marcus knows, I worked in tech for the best part of 16 years. I only really left that world 5 years ago. And even I saw an evolution in the tech world when I first started, when I was, a little fresh-faced graduate, there was this place that was full of, not to offend anyone, but full of weirdos for the most part. Guys who had zero social skills, that were terrible in meetings, terrible to manage. I didn't have to manage them, but I could observe how terrible they're to manage. And I've seen a shift even in the tech world that like people became more personable, able to have conversations, look you in the eye consistently. It was amazing. But there was still a consistency of, like you said, when we've maybe engaging so much of our brain in like thinking and problem solving and solutions and logic and structure, that we kind of almost underuse the part of our brain that's emotional, the part, because like I said, emotions connect human beings, and emotions, vision, our experiences is what really connect us, and be able to kind of take that and put that in a way that's enlivening to people is what really, really brings us together. What do you see as kind of the roots of a lack of kind of confidence and charisma and self-expression? Like when you look at the kind of clients you've worked with and the executives you work with, and you kind of look at who the person is, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of their like upbringing and their experiences that they had and didn't have, what sort of patterns do you start to see?
That's a great question. The answer is in the question. The patterns I start to see are patterns. So what I mean by that is we can move through life in patterned behavior, or we can move through life in unpatterned, spontaneous behavior. And there's value in each, right? If I go down the gym and I'm lifting a weight, I'm going to follow a bicep curl. Right? I'm going to follow a pattern, probably. In fact, if I get really advanced at bicep curls, I might start adding some spontaneity in there and trying other things out. So what happens is, as kids, as like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, we're generally unpatterned. We start to get patterns as we go to school and go through the school system. And then by college, university time, we are like a series of ingrained patterns. And you'll see this play out around you all the time with everyone. So one of the areas it comes out with is language. So if you meet somebody, you might say to them, "Hi, how are you?" Right? And they'll say, "Good. How are you?" And you're like, "Good." That's called phatic speech. It doesn't really serve a purpose beyond, "I'm okay, you're okay. You're not going to kill me, right? I'm not going to kill you, right?" So there's this sub-communication in the communication. Another cliche would be, you're in a bar, you meet somebody and like, "Oh, what do you do?" That cliche quote, "What do you do?" And people will go to what they practice. So if they've practiced asking, "How are you?" and "What do you do?" When you're in a live fire environment and a real environment, the unconscious mind is going to choose what it's already practiced a lot. and it's going to choose its patterns. So the guys who get stuck are the ones who get stuck in pattern behavior. And again, pattern behavior is very useful for solving problems. We've got a problem. Let's go through these steps to fix it. That didn't work. Let's go on to the next set of steps to fix it. Like a mathematical problem you might fix that way. But with connection, with being witty, with being charismatic or anything like that, you're in the moment. You can't be thinking how to problem solve at the same time as being present with somebody. Very easily anyway. That's why I was talking about do that afterwards. So that occurrence of like think about it when you're going somewhere, like you're using the subway, right? You probably sit in the same seat or the same area of carriage. You probably take the same route to work. You probably eat at the same place. You probably buy the same branded food. So all of that, again, it's got a value. It's efficient, but it makes you boring. It makes you efficient, but it makes you boring. So it's good to just investigate what happens if I take a different route to work? What happens if I sit instead of standing? What if, just little different. What happens if I walk down the pavement or the sidewalk and I don't step on the cracks? That kid game. Or I slide down the stair rail instead of walking down the stair rail. And that starts to break us out of that very sanitized way of moving through life. So yeah, patterns are all around us. The trick is to first identify which patterns you follow, and then to start having fun playing by breaking them. What can I get away with here? We're not talking about breaking the law. We're just talking about breaking the rules. Right? So there's loads of rules you can break, and there's no consequence. So at the risk of listening to my own voice too much here, but I was in a park a few months ago, and I was climbing a tree, breaking a pattern. Anyway, so I'm up the tree, and as I looked down, I saw the grass in the park had a big, muddy stain down the middle because everyone was walking through that path. And the park was huge. There's grass everywhere, but everyone would just follow that path, the path of least resistance. Don't have to think. It's efficient. And that for me was like, oh God, such a good metaphor. Because there is value in herd behavior, right? Survivability. But yeah, there's all this whole part for people to play in. They're just like, no, I'm just going to stick to the path, mate. Why? That's the question.
Yeah, the patterns of being, as you were saying it, I thought it was like the small talk and answering the small talk, asking the same questions all the time of people, like, how are you? And, I make this mistake sometimes. I make this mistake a lot. So how are you? It's like this ingrained response that we have in us, or like, what do you do? There's just like these patterns and structures that we follow, and our brain has grooved in them so much that we just do them all the time automatically. And something that I've started to see in some of the men that I work with is like this desire for safety. This predictability is like what you were talking about, the patterns, is a desire for safety and predictability in the patterns that they use, in the small talk, in the questions they ask, even in the responses that they give, like how we so automatically, when someone says, how are you? We say we're good. And I always wonder, and I'm always asking them like, so what are you afraid of saying if you don't say you're good? What are you afraid of the outcome of what might occur if you don't say you're good? And it's really interesting to observe that. And there's a second thing that I've started to think about, particularly with men, because there's a lot of the clients I work with men. And I often ask them about their childhood and about the range of people they met when they were young kids, when they were like between the age of kind of 5 up to even 10, 12. Like, did your parents have people around the house a lot that you would speak to, like other adults? They'd have dinner parties or whatever. Like, were you used to being around other children of different ages and same ages of you? Were you encouraged to socialize with people? And I've started to see a pattern, and I'm interested to see if something you see. I often see men who come from backgrounds where they're not encouraged to really talk and socialize, or there's lots of rigid rules around who they're allowed to talk to and not allowed to talk to. And that seems to impact them. Quite a few men I've met who, for whatever parents, often due to a serious parental mental health issue, they didn't have people that come around the house. They didn't have like adults and young kids and parties and stuff like that where they would be often around people and they kind of learnt to not be social from a young age. And it's just been a way of being. And they, along with the guys who didn't get to, they felt there was lots of rules, is that they were so used to always seeking to just try and be safe and try and stay within the rules of being, of like, that they get into the patterns that you talk about, like the patterns of like, you know, just saying the thing that needs to be said, because they were either so afraid, they learned to be afraid of being different or being some way they might stand out, or the punishment they experienced when they were young was felt severe to them. So they kind of carried this kind of like wounding or trauma, whatever word we want to use, into their adulthood, into their kind of socializing in those years. And then bullying is also a really common one. I've noticed is like they're experiencing bullying often in early adolescent years, kind of like anything from 10 to kind of 13, where they felt that painting outside the lines, or, you know, in your metaphor, walking outside the path, led to like actual real pain, and that it kind of stifled their confidence and self-expression. I don't know if you see anything similar.
Yeah, you know, I think this is just my opinion. But I think we have like a bunch of lifetimes within a lifetime. Like I think we got a childhood, and then we've got, maybe if we're lucky as a guy, we get a rites of passage into manhood. And then maybe we leave college, university, and then we have another rites of passage that we create ourselves. And then perhaps we have kids, or we don't. And then so I think we get chances to reset. And some people, like, they might have had a good childhood, like quote unquote good. But so for me, I had quite a balanced childhood. I was lucky, great parents. And then when I went to school, I had a bit of bullying. Not I was bullying. I got bullied a bit when I was 13 or 14. So that would tie up with that. But then I had a rejuvenation, say, in my 20s. So yes, there are definitely patterns. I think what the important part is, though, is to realize that we are writing our story every day. And, you know, to sound like a investment portfolio thesis, like, past performance doesn't necessarily equal future performance. Like, we don't have to belong to our story. So a lot of the negativity or the negative things that happen to us, we can, even if they're occurring right now, like someone's listening to me now going, who's this British person? What's this British person talking about? Right. So you can get attached to the moment. In other words, being attached is, that's part of my story now. Or we can be unattached. We observe it, but we don't make it part of our story. So I think there is definitely a value in looking back at our past story, finding the bits we don't like, and asking ourselves, first of all, what was the lesson in that story? What was it trying to teach us? And you'll know if there's a lesson to be learned in anything, because you'll feel resistance. And at any point in your life, if there's resistance coming up, there's a lesson there. You'll know when you've got the lesson, because you'll be like, hallelujah, like you'll feel like unburdened. Well, that leads on to the second part, which is forgiveness. Is almost to express gratitude for the experience, or at least to be unattached. Like, I don't need that lesson anymore. I've absorbed it. I've resolved it. And forgiveness for me is understanding that and allowing that to put that bit of the story down. Because the story you're writing now is much more fun. Like, yeah, like, oh, I went on a podcast today. My hair was scruffy, so I wore a hat. But the other guy had scruffy hair and he put a hat on as well. It was good. Like, we can make it up as we go along. So that's where the joy is.
Yeah, the story we tell ourselves, you know, and then how so many of us have like got these very permanent stories that we create. Often in life, we take a very temporal event that just happens in time, and we create a permanent meaning about it. You know, like rejection is a really good example. When I was 13, I went up to this girl at school and I asked her if she'd be my girlfriend, and she said, no. So some people, they're just like, oh, that happened. Cool. Like, life goes on. Some people take that and they go, I decided then that I should never talk to any women ever again, because if I talk to a woman again, they could be mean to me and I'm going to be rejected. And I never want to feel that way. And we like write this event permanently into our story. And then we then find evidence throughout life to back up the truth of that original story. And I think it's in line with what you're saying. It's like we're writing our story, we're writing our truth, and we are always in power of writing the present moment forward. But what you're also saying, I think, is a really important part of, therapy is like forgiving the past, forgiving those people in the past. Like maybe there was that girl when you were 13 that rejected you, and going, I forgive her. She was just a 13-year-old girl with ranged hormones like me. And she just emotionally reacted to me in that moment. And it was nothing more than just that. And what, like you said, the lesson, like she taught me in that moment that like, maybe I need to be a bit more resilient, or maybe I need to not take things so personally because the meaning isn't there. And then this is the kind of way that we can move through life, so we can like let go of the energy that holds us from the past, of the story that holds us and locks us in being this person who can and can't do certain things.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully articulated. I was at an airport trying to scooch into the lounge. Like, I didn't have. I thought, I wonder if I can sneak in here. The answer is I couldn't. But what I did learn from that experience is there was a guy in front of me, and I don't know, like he was just very jolly, and he walks up to the two girls on the gate to get in, and he goes, "How are you ladies today? Are you well?" And they're like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, thank God. Gee, thank God for that." And they burst out laughing. And I love that attitude of just like, thank God to everything, right? So like, oh, thank God. Like, so why, how I tie this in is like, if I look for evidence I'm a loser, I'll
Mm.
find it. I've got loads of it. Tommy Hill, what? Right. But if I look for evidence of like why I'm a success or whatever, then I'll find it. Generally, positive evidence is harder to find. However, if I do get that result, like, oh, I'm a loser, thank God. That's how I bookend it. Like
Mm.
anything that goes shit, thank God. And that's the end of it. That's how I practice unattachment to stuff. Like, in fact, I'm a loser. You think I'm a loser? I'm much worse. Don't worry. Like, yeah, thanks for thinking of me so highly. I appreciate it. Like, I'm having fun with it. Right. And that's my story in the present moment. All fear exists in the future, and all
Mm.
sadness exists in the past. And joy, that little fragment is in this sliver of the moment. That's it, right now. Fleeting, fleeting, fleeting. But we get to create it as well. And like, what's in the future? Not much. Fear. Oh, well, great. What's in the part of sadness? Future is to stay in the present. That's where your joy is.
So, and I think we might touch on this a little bit earlier, but I think this is a question I'm really curious about, is how do you observe a lack of kind of charisma impacting people's careers? I imagine there's a lot of middle managers, aspirational men in the workplace who, yeah, their lack of charisma is impacting them, but they might not be kind of readily aware of how it is impacting their kind of performance and their kind of upward mobility.
So I think it's useful to like, what is charisma? And so lots of people have thrown definitions out. My definition is it's the ability to evoke emotions in others whilst making them feel safe and comfortable. And why is that important? Because it makes you memorable. If you make somebody feel an emotion, or you trigger an emotion in somebody, bad or good, positive or negative, you will be memorable. You're not just invisible. So a lack of charisma creates invisibility. It sounds cool, superhero power, but really, if you got it, if you're invisible, were you even there? So being memorable is what puts you on someone's periphery, right? When they think of something, they're like, oh, that guy. I remember I was working in Procter and Gamble. Nothing too flash. I was the mailroom guy, but this there was this chap who worked there, and he was very charismatic, and he was in the office with me. Just he was a manager, but he was just getting his mail. And another manager from a different department came in, and she said hello to him, and they had a little chat. And then she left. And then she came back and he said, "Oh, I was just talking to your sister a minute ago." And that created that little emotional spike in their conversation. She's like, "Oh, you." And I've always made a point to study, like, why did that happen? What was the effect of that? But what he was doing is he's creating that memorable moment. So if you think about anyone, like you see that person who takes your breath away, that, oh, she's amazing, right? Why? She's evoking emotion in you through perhaps how she's moving, aesthetics. So being memorable isn't about being polished and perfect, right? It's about being a little bit rough around the edges sometimes, a bit edgy. It's taking a risk, even though you tell a joke, it doesn't work. That happens to all of us. Uh, Interestingly, right, it's not about how people react to you. It's about how you react to their reaction of you. So I'll say that one more time. It's not about how people respond to you. It's about how then you choose to respond to that response. And I'm always going to respond in a way that makes me feel good. So if I tell a joke and it fails, I'm like, I acknowledge that. I'm like, oh God, it's my first day. What can I say? And then it keeps the vibe up anyway. Sometimes I like to let the vibe drop because I'm a bit of a knob, but I'm doing that because I'm having fun. So yeah, a lack of charisma, a lack of, like, everyone's charismatic. It's really what charisma is for the individual is removing your blocks so your authentic self comes through. So then that's what makes you memorable. So a lack of that means you're going to get passed up. People aren't going to remember you.
And that's interesting you say that, right? Because it's what kind of comes to me is, like you said, the emotion you trigger in people, good or bad, makes you memorable. But also there's the second piece there about how you react to people's reactions. Because if we go into an interaction, whether that's an interview is a really good example of this, actually. If we go into an interview and we're nervous and we're scared and we're worrying about not getting the job, however, because we have that story in our mind, however the people are towards us, we're focusing on this internal story experiences of we're not going to get the job because we're not good enough. So we respond to them, their laughter, as like, oh no, they're laughing at me. Or they're smiling, oh, they're just appeasing me because they know I'm shit and they're going to not hire me anyway. And we react in a way that's like, that kind of pulls the mood down. When in fact, we could go into a job interview and actually it's not going very well, but we are reacting as if this is going really, really well. And people will start to come onto our frame. Because it reminds me of frames, and people talk about frames, like the strongest frame wins. And I used to think that was like really malicious thing. And then I kind of noticed Donald Trump in these last years, and you're like, oh yeah, like this man has such a strong idea of how the world is, or projects that so strongly. People start to fall in line with it, even if it seems ludicrous. And I've seen this in meetings, I've seen this on talks, I've seen it in places where the person who's speaking is able to, by their force of will or their force of belief in themselves and their way of reacting, almost completely shifts the room's way of thinking or way of being in that moment, because their way of seeing the world is almost like infectious, not necessarily positive or negative, but it just simply is infectious because they're just so tuned in. They're so in the belief of the truth of their own reality.
Yeah, I think so. Frame being this, our perception of reality. One of the most powerful attractive traits, and I don't mean attractive as in like, hey ladies, I mean like we see that quality in people and it magnetizes us to them, is the ability to be consistent. If you think of the opposite end of the spectrum, like who were the most loathed people in through history, is usually people who were traitors, who were inconsistent. They lied, they said one thing and did another, and chop off their heads. They did that for a reason, because they wanted to weed out, not saying it was good or bad, but they wanted to weed out inconsistent qualities out of a society. So that's why treachery, betrayal, if you look at religious texts or anything, it's always like, oh, they're the worst of the worst. So the opposite of that is consistent. Like, and as a man, it's like, my word is my bond. That would be, the positive of that. So yeah, your perception of reality controls what you project. I would add, though, a thought that it may not even necessarily be the strongest frame. It's the most flexible. So your ability, like if I have a really strong frame, like, hey, I'm an alpha dude guy, and I just, yeah, and a little, a 5-year-old kid comes up to me, and I'm like, hey, bro, Like if I hold that frame, that's not necessarily going to connect with that kid. But that might not be what the situation needs at that moment. Like maybe that child needs to be protected or needs to be directed in some way. In which case, maybe that frame is ideal. But if that child's crying, and I'm like, "Hey, dry those tears, frame," like I actually need to change my frame there, perhaps, to come down to their level and let them almost determine the frame. So being able to move and change your frame, being able to be what the moment needs, I think is very powerful. And it goes back to that idea of past, present, future. Uh, a way that guys get trapped is they confuse politeness, which is patterns, with manners. Your parents maybe said to you, or your teacher said to you, be, good manners. But good manners doesn't equal politeness. For me, to expand on this, good manners is being present to what the moment needs every single moment. Sometimes the moment needs you to do something that's impolite. So what do I mean by that? Politeness might be somebody walks into a room and you stand up to shake their hand, right? Because that's the social protocol. You're being polite. You're going through a established pattern of behavior. But what if somebody walks in the room, they're hobbling a bit, you notice this, so actually good manners is pulling out a chair for them. It looks the same. Oh, he's being polite. No, you're asking yourself, what do I need? What do they need? What does the moment need right now? And so sometimes the moment needs like if you see a hysterical person like, in a movie and they're like, slap them around the face. That's not polite, but that's what the moment needs at that moment. If they're on fire, let me just politely, I need to put the flame. No, the moment needs chucking a bucket of water over them. So we get lost, I think, when we let politeness, pattern behavior overcome manners. And manners are different every single moment.
Yeah, I love that. I love how the flexibility of, like, I actually say this often, is like when we're attuned to the moment, when we're really present with the people in front of us, with not just the people, with the environment we're in. So like if we're at a cocktail party, for instance, and we're with some friends that we know, and we're really truly present in the moment, we felt the conversation that's just been had, and we know the energy of that conversation. If it's like dipped down, and it might just need a little pick me up, and it might need someone just to, I don't know, something stupid like point out that someone's dropped their drink and everyone has a little ha, and that's the perfect thing to do. It might be rude to point that thing out, but in that moment, because you have been present to the moment, the energy of the people you're with and everything, you have a really lovely, like almost like you have your fingers into the pulse of the moment. You're feeling the moment, like you're constantly with the moment. You're not thinking beyond this moment because you don't need to. You're not in the past because, again, you don't need to. You're just here with this moment and the joy that can be created and brought to this moment.
Absolutely. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there with the power of presence. So if we're trying to have a conversation in our head of what should I say? Are these people going to like me? Have I stuck my foot in it? We're already not being present. If the voice is in our head, the chatterbox is in our head, presence takes a nosedive. But if we treat the experience in front of us as a meditation, we notice things come up, tensions in our body or, hysterical moments, but we just go back to our breathing and we be not in a state of emotion, but as relaxed as we possibly can be. So our receptivity increases. And so those moments that you talk about, you see them, you pick them up, you respond to them. And that's actually a secret of how to be witty. Like it's just catching the moments. When you're in that space of, as I said, of receptivity, you have a lot more response time than somebody's like, oh God, I hope I fit in right now. I hope I don't say the wrong thing. So as my dad, when I was a kid, he worked in sales and he would answer the phone and the person would say, oh, I'm just inquiring about something. He'd say, how'd you like a punch in the face? That was his. They hadn't had that conversation. Like they're like, what is a massive interrupt? Now, doing that kind of stuff is risky, but risk taking is sexy. sometimes you will get it wrong. And by the way, that example is like an extreme example. You don't have to go so crazy like that. But what happens is the more you do it, the more calibrated you become. So calibration is the master skill. Calibration is what's the least amount of effort I need to do to get the result I want. Now, what I mean by that is that let's say you're in a nightclub or something, and you see somebody's attention you want to get. It could be the bar, it could be the person doing drinks, it could be the attractive person down the end of the bar, right? If you go, hey, that will get the result that they notice you. But it's not necessarily elegant. It's not necessarily calibrated. You could wink at them, right? That's a bit less than that. So you've reduced the energy, but maybe the result's the same. Or you could give a more sly wink. Or you could just smile. Or what's less than a smile? Just hold eye contact. Now, the fact is, you might just hold eye contact, they don't notice you. So then that's when you need to, almost like a volume knob, like you need to tune it in. Just what's that sweet spot of energy? Now, the good thing is, if you use too little energy, you've not lost any lives. They haven't noticed anyway. So you got away with it. You just up the energy a little bit. So this is why being smooth, you often see in Hollywood movies like, hey, who's that smooth, chill guy? It's because they're using the least amount of energy possible to create a response in the other person.
Wow. It's this like, it's again with the calibration, the tunement, it's like it's the subtlety of it. Like having these subtle little cues and being able to give and receive them as well, right? Because this is a lot of the kind of social dynamics is these subtle cues. And I guess a lot of men, they're not in the subtle. They're not living in the subtle. They're not observing. Their presence isn't deep enough, isn't like grounded in the moment enough to notice these kind of subtle cues that are happening. So they just kind of go over their heads. You know, like women could be really plugged into like tiny social cues, you know, mostly because, you know, if we look at evolutionary, they need to stay safe and socializing is something they, you know, really heavily, I'm use the word groomed into from a young age, terrible use of the word, but they learn socializing from a young age. They're like, you know, girls in the playground, talking, chatting. Boys are out in the football field kicking the ball at each other and pushing each other and slapping each other in the face. They're not learning those social cues. So I guess into adulthood, the men who are well calibrated are willing to take risks, and then they become sexy. There's anything that said that taking risks is sexy, because if you're willing to take a risk, then that must inherently show that you have a certain level of confidence in yourself and your ability, I imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it totally does. And having the real confidence is not necessarily the result. It's if it doesn't go to plan, how do you handle that? I was in an art class once. It was life drawing, naked chicks, amazing. Anyway, I digress. It was a naked guy that day, but so I was drawing this naked guy, and there was a girl on the other easel, came up to me, and she grabbed my arm and was like, "Wow, that's amazing use of charcoal, whatever it was." And I remember she's grabbing my arm, and I was like, "Wow, that doesn't usually happen to me. That random guys just grab my arm." And I was like, "What do you do?" And I actually had been having a conversation about this topic the week before, so I was very jammy, very lucky on this. And my friend said to me, "If you never know what to do, just don't do anything. Just no big deal." And I was like, "Dang, that lesson got hardwired in quick." So yeah, just the problem is with men, because it's an authentic man podcast. So the problem guys have is a man would do well if he exudes emotion. Whoa, just break into song, whatever. But they do less well when they emotionally react. Like, you grabbed my arm. What you grabbed my arm for? Like, so if you're not sure what to do, something happens, just don't do anything. Just carry on, get more information. No reaction. James Bond playing poker. That's fair.
It's a really good analogy. James Bond playing poker.
Yeah,
so we talked a lot about the kind of issues that men have and, what they are, what they look like. And we touched upon some of this stuff, but what can a man start to do to start to embody some of these, like the calibration, the attunement, even the risk taking, we kind of covered the mindset stuff, but like how, I guess the big question is like, how does a man start to develop personal charisma in their life?
There's a bunch of different approaches you can take if you're starting out and you're like, oh, which direction do I go? And I understand that can be tricky. So I'm going to share a few ideas, a few different directions, and I would suggest you pick the one that sounds, yeah, that sounds right. I'll try that one out first. One thing you can do, one of the most charismatic guys I ever met, he's an accountant, right? He's the least charismatic industry. Sorry, accountants, but he loves it. He is such a number geek. Anyway, he's on good money, right? He's an accountant. Cool. Have you ever met a broke accountant? So at the weekends, I was like, what are you doing this weekend? He's like, I'm working. I'm like, you're working on Saturday? He's like, yeah. He goes, I've got a job delivering pizza. I'm like, what are you delivering pizza for? He goes, I work at a holiday park near where he lived. He was working at his holiday park delivering pizza, just for just for the jokes, just for the amusement of it. So he'd like knock on people's doors and like be eating a bit of their pizza. So, oh, sure, some. And I was like, what? It was bamboozling to me. And he's like, yeah. He goes, well, if I get fired, I don't mind. He's an accountant. He's got a full-time job, but he was putting himself in a part-time job where he'd get loads of experience of interacting with people on a daily basis. He was basically their delivery boy, their go-to guy, their bus boy kind of thing. Super charismatic dude. He was not above just playing around and doing fun things. In fact, I met him working in a cinema, and I learned from him by watching him. We would sell popcorn, and I would say like things like, phatic speak, like, can I help anybody? That would, can I help anyone? Oh. He would just stand there going, can I help anyone? Can I help anyone? Can I help anyone? Like a robot, like a weirdo, like an idiot. And people loved him, and he would just try and experiment. So he would put himself into jobs where he could, with low risk jobs where he could just play around and be goofy and get loads of experiences. So what jobs do that? Anything where you're in customer service, anything where you're facing people, uh, anything where you're working on a kiosk, even McDonald's, perfect, because you've got a constant stream of people. And so one of the things I did is I worked in the cinema, and I made it a point that every single person who would come up to me, I would say something different, even if it was like, you look like you're hungry, or he dies at the end, like if they're going to see a movie. But I would keep changing it, and I started telling crap jokes, and it didn't matter because those people would be gone in like 20 or 30 seconds, and the next people would be in. So that built up my repertoire. It gave me lots of reference experiences. So that's one thing you can do. That was a very long answer for that. Another thing you can do is hang around people who have the skill or ability you want. That might be you go to a drama class or comedy improv class, or you just even get put into a random group of people. There'd be a couple of characters that stand out. Like I go to a boxing class a couple of times a week. There's a couple of charismatic people in there. You'll know who they are because they make other people feel emotions. For intimidation, you're going to punch your face in. But those personalities will stick out. So try and hang around. Put yourself in the same space as people like that. Another thing you can do is if you're getting the groceries or shopping, because we're British, right? But if you pay money to somebody, right, on a till, on a checkout, you bought the right to talk to them as well, right? So, oh, it's £15. I buy this bottle of crap whiskey for £15. I'm going to get £15 of free training out of this as well. That's another way. So it's about building up those reference experiences. And as I mentioned earlier, not just you do it and forget about it. You think, what could I do better next time? A completely different approach is, you said embodiment, and that's such a powerful concept, because the problem is with guys, we think in our heads, right? We're like problem solving, but we've also got centers of decision making in our heart and in our gut. And so in the olden days of the Hermetic orders that were around Europe, there was the idea of you had three cauldrons: your head, heart, and gut, and your best decisions would be made when all three of those are in alignment. So does your gut match your heart? Does your heart match your head? So making heart-led decisions, making gut decisions, just trying to move your conscious awareness to those areas of your body. Now, my improv teacher, years ago said this. I don't know if it was just true or not, but it was an interesting thought. He said apparently the Romans, I guess he wasn't around at the time, but he said they thought the brain just cooled your blood. They thought the solar plexus was the area of where your consciousness was. And so he was saying that we've learned to put our consciousness in our head, but you can, through, if you meditate, you can put your consciousness in every other part of your body, even that part. Yeah. The kneecap. That's what I was talking about. Um, so we can move our consciousness around. So that's a thing to play with. Move your consciousness into different areas of your body. Like, are you approaching a conversation or approaching experience like you've got to go on stage and give a presentation from your head, or are you just going to wing it from your heart, like you feel into it, or are you going to do it from your gut and just be like really ballsy, or actually all your balls if you're, you know. So that's the fourth area. That's that's the VIP training area. Anyway, so but this is something to play with, embodiment, being connected to your body. So a really charismatic guy I met was a tango teacher, and he didn't speak much. He wasn't super chatty, but he was charismatic because he made the room feel like electricity, just because he knew how to hold himself and look at people. And I see into your soul. I'm like, oh my God, all the bad things I've done. And he knows. I see it in the way you dance. So there's lots of ways that the ultimate thing, right? The big thing. And this is something, you know, as I said, I've been doing this, or you mentioned, I've been doing this for 2 decades. And I only just found this out recently. Dang, if I'd found this out at the start. If you want to get good at something, the secret is you make a very clear decision with yourself that I am going to get really good at this. Every student I've had that have done amazing, they have made that decision. Right, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna get really good at it. And you start by making that decision. So if you want to be really charismatic and there's no teacher out there, there's no route or path ahead, you can do it. You can figure it out. But you just got to start with the decision. Like, right, I'm gonna figure this out. And yes, you can do it. Everyone is your teacher. So anytime you chat to anybody and you feel resistance, and what do I mean by resistance? Tension in your body, butterflies in your stomach, doubt, fear, uncertainty, anything like that, there's a lesson to be learned there. Because if you think like when you, so when do you drive?
Mhm.
Yeah, when
Yes.
you want to start the car, you just put the key in the ignition and turn it on, right? Or you press a button these days. You don't really think about it. You're thinking about, I need to get to the end of the road or wherever you're going. So it's an unconscious decision almost to put the key in the ignition. You just do it because that's what you've always done to get where you need to get. And when doubt and fear comes up, you don't fear, unless you were in the mafia, you don't fear about putting the key in the ignition, right? You just turn the car. Car's not going to blow up, hopefully. So anytime you're getting tension in your body or resistance or the conscious mind's coming alive, and you start talking like, oh, what's going on? What am I doing? That's because it's not seamless yet. It's not unconscious yet. So that means there's there's lessons to be learned there. Because once it becomes unconscious, you don't need to think about it anymore. It doesn't even become a thing. So really true charisma is not something you do, it's something you are. And that comes from working through all the little blocks that appear. Now, those blocks aren't like because you're broken, like, oh, how come I've got these blocks and no one else has? Everyone's got blocks. They all have. They may appear in different ways, but they've got them. So it's great that you feel a block. Most people just skim over it or go and drink alcohol or something. Like if the block comes up, ask yourself, right, what is this trying to teach me? The lesson will present itself and you'll know the lesson's done because you don't think about it anymore. It's done. You don't, it's seamless, just like flicking on a light switch or turning that ignition key.
I love that analogy you say about not fearing turning the key. You know, we don't worry about that. We don't worry about that choice. We don't overthink it. We don't think, oh my God, what are people going to think about me when I turn this key? We just kind of do it. We trust that everything's going to be okay. And we trust that we can handle. We know it's going to be okay. We also trust it's going to happen. And if something doesn't happen, we kind of trust in that moment we can deal with it. I go, it's just turn the key. Yeah. And there's just so many different ways, you know, like everyone is your teacher. I love what you were saying about the head, the heart and the gut. I did a training for a company called ISTA a few years ago, which was pretty wild. And I think of it because a friend of mine has just done it now, and they had exactly that. It's like the head, the heart, the gut, the balls, and all these places are helping you make decisions. You can kind of bring your awareness to each of them, and they give you a different type of information. You know, like when we think of our heads, we think of very logical, and our heart is like the feeling, gut is like, you know, almost like intuition. Our balls can be quite just instinctive and passionate. But we get so stuck in the head, you know, we've come to realize that we think our head is our brains are the most important things, when in fact, you know, there's a lot of great information coming out of the kind of trauma therapies and talking about the importance of alignment of heart. And I'll add in, actually, I did a course for a company called Heart Math about a couple of years ago, and they say that the heart sends out a electromagnetic field that's about 3 feet from our bodies. So when we interact with people, our hearts respond to their emotions, even if they don't mention what's going on. There's like a sub-communication. So like our heart has like huge amounts of useful information for us to work with. And, you know, it's so easy for us to just like be in the head because that's the safe place. That's the place we're used to. It's where we feel at home to some degree. But in fact, as I hear you say, it's like we're actually cutting ourselves off from like 75% of the available knowledge about the moment that's there for us.
Yeah, totally. It's and I think I say human life, but I think, you know, everyday life is set up for that, to be in the head. So you do have to make a bit of an effort to get out. That's why I like to try and find reasons to play. So play doesn't mean necessarily stuck in the mud or playground games. That can be fun, but it's like maybe doing new things as much as you can, because you get new information come in. As soon as you put yourself in areas of new information, like go to a woods, go to a forest, if you that's not something you usually do. Go-karting if you've never tried it. Getting all these new experiences gives you touch points, reference points, and that's how you collect evidence to not only write a good story, but also to just develop yourself, really.
Beautiful. Oh man, it's been so really insightful, because I've this area of charisma and confidence. Oh, I think about it a lot, but I've never like really go into the depth that, you know, I know that you have over the years and been the real scientist, and seeing how much this overlaps with so much of the, you know, you kind of talked about the spiritual work, and that's something I really got myself into, you know, 10 or so years ago, around presence, around attunement, about, you know, openness, authenticity, all these things. Because I think sometimes we think of charisma and we think of like someone who's sleazy and so forth, but really it's this like ability to influence people through emotion and feeling. And this is something, you know, what I've really taken from this is like, this is something we can 100%, this is a skill set we can 100% learn with energy, with focus, with attention. And like you said earlier, it's like, just because you have blocks, we're not broken. They're just, it's like, it's kind of like walls that just need to be broken down, you know, to expand the house. Yeah.
Knock it through.
Knock it through. Great.
Get some sunlight in there. Yeah.
Get that throughout lounge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, Marcus, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Like, just wonderful to see you generally, and still feel that, you know, obviously listeners, you won't know this, but Marcus always had this very playful way of being, and it's just wonderful to be reminded of that, and it being an experience of him and his general demeanor and love for play. You know, this way of being with people to be with people, not to get anything from people. I think it's a really important thing that's come through the conversation we've had today. And Marcus, I imagine the listeners are wondering, you know, where they can hear more of you, where they can find out more about you and your work and work with you.
Yeah. My website is yourcharismacoach.com. And there's a free ebook on there as well, just to get you started, which is the 21. Oh, do you know what? I can't even remember the name of my own book. That's a great sign, isn't it? It's been on there. But no, it's How to Talk to Anyone Without Fear of Rejection. So in that, I break down 21 principles that you can follow that I just get you started in a conversation, and a good, memorable conversation as well. And YouTube channel, Your Charisma Coach. So one thing I've always loved to do is actually demonstrate what I teach. rather than just be a talking head. I know we're talking heads right now, but like let's go and see if this approach works. Let's see what happens if we give a presentation and say this word in the presentation, for example. Just really trying stuff out, treating reality like a laboratory, which it can be. So yeah, that's how you find out about me. I'm kind of currently retired. I do the odd workshop now and then we sometimes put details up on yourcharismacoach.com. So yeah, keep your eyes out. But really, it's just been it's a pleasure being able to chat about this stuff. I haven't talked about it for a while, so it's good to get the message out there again.
Pleasure. So listeners, if you enjoyed the episode, two things I want to ask you. Share it with someone who you feel needs it. But also, if you can, I would love you to just go rate review in Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's really helpful to me to get more people to listen to this wonderful message. But I will leave you to get on the rest of the day and say a big thank you. Thank you to you listening. Thank you to Marcus.